All right, here we go. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the first episode of the new podcast, which is, hey, let me pick your brain. And that, I know it sounds weird, but let me tell you where that came from. First off, let me introduce you to the host of this show. His name, my good friend, Mr. Dr. Blake. Y'all give it up for Mr. Dr. Blake Lewis. Before I explain to y'all, let's talk about this for a second. This man, Blake, as recording this podcast, walked across the stage about, 5 days ago? Blake, tell the people what you walk across the stage for.
Well, I wasn't going to bring this up, but thank you. So I got...
bringing it up.
So I got my doctorate in educational ministry, and so really it's a concentration in next gen ministry. So now I'm focusing on birth through college. That's kind of the classes that I have taken, but that was what my degree was in.
Let me tell y'all this right now. Listen, when Brandon said he was going to bring y'all a ministry podcast, you didn't think, oh man, he's going to get a doctor to come lead this for us. Well, I did, man. I'm looking out for y'all. We got a doctor leading the ministry podcast. I mean, he's the most qualified of all the podcast hosts. He's the most qualified. You know what I'm saying? And so, no pressure, Blake.
But thank you.
No pressure. Listen, this is my homie. Y'all know Blake. Blake's been on the podcast before, but after we started talking about the whole umbrella idea with the podcast, Blake called me like he always does. We always talk back and forth. He was like, "Hey, I got this idea, about a podcast," and I was like, "I'm glad you said that, Blake," because I was just talking to my wife about who am I going to get to be the podcast leader of the ministry stuff. And I was like, well, if I asked Blake, I don't know if he'd be interested. And you called me about it. So it worked out perfectly. And so just so you know, Miranda was like, yeah, ask Blake to do it. And I was like, he wouldn't want to do that. He's a doctor now.
Oh my gosh.
And here we are. So listen, Blake is going to be leading this podcast. And so this podcast is going to be formed after the conversation that me and him always have. Me and Blake always call each other about ministry stuff. And the conversation always starts off like, hey, let me pick your brain about something. And we were like, how fitting, when we're thinking about names, how fitting is the name of this podcast, basically what we've been doing. And so we just always pick each other's brains. So, Blake, explain to everybody what your vision behind this podcast is and what they get to look forward to in the future. So you take it away. This is yours now. I'm handing you the crown.
Yeah, so the picking your brain is, literally, like you said, something that we have said to each other all the time. And it can either be like really one of two ways. One of like, hey, this is an idea that I have. Let me run it by you. Let me pick your brain. Let me see if you see something that I'm not seeing or if this makes sense. And so we kind of run stuff by each other that way. But it's also, hey, I know you're really good at this particular area. So let me pick your brain. Let me see what you're thinking, what you've thought through about this particular thing, whatever it is we're doing. And so that's kind of the vision of the podcast is I want to try to bring in people that are really doing ministry at a high level. And how can we learn from them? Because that's something in my own ministry life that I've always tried to keep is to always be a learner. No matter how long I've been in ministry, no matter how much school I have, I always can learn from somebody else. When I go to a conference, you in particular have made fun of me because technology is something that I do a lot with. You would make fun that I go into the technology breakout at like Conclave. You're like, why are you going in there? You're getting a doctorate in that. Because I always think that you can get a nugget from somebody, just a little piece of wisdom from somebody, then it helps you grow. And that's kind of what I hope the goal of this podcast is. There's some things that I'll ask questions to people that people will be like, yeah, I kind of knew that. I already have this that works for me. But there may be at least one thing that you could take away from at every podcast that will help you in your own ministry grow. And so that's the goal behind the podcast in my mind.
Well, you heard it here first. I mean, he just even answered that question like a doctor, man. That was just beautiful. And so I'm excited, man. This is one of the ones that when I first started the Intelligent Nonsense podcast, ministry is a part of who I am, what I do. And so I think the way we're doing this now with the umbrella and allowing people to say, hey, I want to come and hear just about your ministry stuff. I think this is going to allow that to be even better because now they can just click on the episode and be like, hey, I'm here for the ministry stuff. Because everybody don't care about college football. Everybody don't care about, the girl talk that my wife and my sister are going to, have a show on, all those different things. And so I'm excited that people can come to the Intelligent Nonsense page and get what they want out of it. And so all my ministry people out there, this is your chance to check in. We are making this for you. We want y'all to really just benefit from what we've learned over the years and still learning. And so one thing we both love to do is a network and, like I said, pick each other's brains and other people in ministry's brain. And so I think this is going to be a great resource for everybody. And so you're not getting this big corporate, whatever. You're going to get the nitty gritty, how we talk, how we process stuff. And so if you don't like it, cool. Just, all right, that was dumb. And then come back for the next episode. And so you won't fall in love with everything. There's times I listen to podcasts. I'm like, yep, I'm not doing that. But I keep on moving. So anyway, yeah, you get to hear from Blake. Blake's going to be hosting it every week. I might pop in, pop out whenever. But I'm ready to be a fan. I'm ready to just learn from the guests he's got coming in. There may be some episodes where I have some people like, man, that might be a really good person to have on the show, and I might pop in and do an episode. So you might hear my beautiful voice one day. But for the most part, Blake's gonna be leading this thing up, and I'm excited for him. I'm excited for the guests that are coming on, and I hope that this takes off. And the Picking Your Brain podcast can be a staple in the ministry community because I think there's a shortage right now, right, Blake? There is a ministry shortage right now. And so, man, we can do anything we can to help people continue to succeed in the area that we love and we care about, which is ministry. Then we're down to do it. So, Blake. So what you got, man? Kind of walk us through what we got for the rest of the episode.
Yeah, and one other thing I wanted to mention, too, as a goal for the podcast is I'm somebody that doesn't listen to a lot of podcasts, especially because some of them are 30, 45 minutes to an hour long, and I just don't have that time oftentimes to sit and listen. And so what I want this podcast to be is something that would be the length of a phone call. Like if I call you, I'm picking your brain, it's usually 15, maybe 20 minutes. That's what I want this to be. I want it to be something that, hey, I got a lunch meeting in town. Let me pop in this podcast real quick, pop it in like it's a cassette. Let me turn on this.
You're so old,
podcast. Bro. I know. I don't even listen to cassettes. I don't even know what
Imagine the guy talking to you about your technology and your kids, and the first thing he makes a reference to is a cassette tape. I'm walking out. Give my money back, bro.
Yeah. But what's so bad is you brought me in to talk about it. So there you go.
But a cassette.
Well, okay, let's refocus. All right. So you're headed to lunch and you have 15 minutes. I want something that you could just listen to on the way to lunch and not something that you have to commit an hour to. And so that's kind of the goal. So I'll ask generally 5 to 7 questions to the person. Some of them will be the same every week. Some of them will be specific for that person. And so hopefully it'll be something that'll be helpful to people. And so for the rest of the episode, I'll ask you just a handful of the questions because we're probably already getting close to time now. But one of the things that I think is interesting,
we still got a lot of time left. We're chilling.
But you're going to elaborate on your answers and take a lot of time.
That's true. That's true. That's why you're the doctor. You think about these things.
So one of the questions that I always like to ask ministers and to kind of see how they unwind is because our schedule, especially youth ministers, are crazy. And so one of the things I always like to ask is, what do you do on your off days? Whenever if that's a Friday or Saturday for you, what does it look like and how do you relax as a minister on your off days?
So we're off on Fridays. This is a great question. So I have to take my son to school. My wife takes our younger daughter still in daycare, so we take her. I go and I try to work out in the mornings because I'm the person that if I don't do it in the morning, I'm going to talk myself out of it. So I drop my kid off, and our gym that we go to is literally like a half a mile from my son's school. And so I go work out in the mornings, and then if I have nothing else planned for that day, I try to just unwind. And I'm a gamer. I like playing video games. And so like for me, video games is a way for me to like turn my brain off and just have a good time. And so I like to play video games. Some of my other friends, they either working from home or they're off on Fridays. Another good friend of mine, he's a youth pastor as well. He's off on Fridays as well. So we might link up, play some games. And then I like to spend the other half of the day either doing housework. My wife is very adamant that if I'm off on Fridays, because she's not off and my kids are at school, you better get some housework done. And I used to fight that. And then I realized I'm not winning this battle. And so I try to get some good cleaning in. If that's doing laundry, if that's doing the dishes or whatever, I try to knock that out. And so recently I've also gotten into a side hustle with photography and videography. And so if I don't have
really cool, by the way. If you haven't
I
checked them out, you
appreciate
need to check
that.
them out. They look really
I
good.
appreciate that. I'm very, very good at going down rabbit holes. And so, with photography and videography, I will just jump down rabbit holes, and I've learned a lot in a very short period of time. And it's like drinking from fire hoses, and I've been doing that a lot. And so I've gotten really, really good at photography and videography in retrospect. Like in a short period of time, I'm good at, I feel like, where I should be at this point in time. I still have a long way to go, but so I do that a lot on Fridays too. I got if I got photography shoots or whatever, or video shoots, or I'm editing or whatever. So that's normally what my Friday looks like. And before you look up, man, it's 4:30, 5 o'clock. The time to get my kids. So I enjoy having my off days on Fridays. Nobody else is at the house, but I feel like they disappear pretty quick.
I got you. Okay, cool. Something else that I always like to ask people, because people listen to different preachers, but what preacher would you say you listen to, maybe the top 2 or 3 that you listen to most often?
Oh, easily. So hilariously, if that's even a word. So if I'm doing like workouts where I'm not like, I'm sorry, I don't know. That's why I don't have I need to go back to school. So my number one pastor is Brian Laritz, Pastor Brian Laritz, which I put Blake on Brian Laritz a long time ago. Yeah. When I'm working out, if I'm not doing like a full body workout, if I'm doing like the treadmill or the bike like I did this morning, I put a sermon on. And so Brian Laritz is like my go-to sermons. And he is really, really good. He was like really, really good inspiration for me when I first started into ministry, even before I got into ministry. And so I love his preaching style. He's really, really good. He's in North Carolina right now with David Greer, a part of his staff. He's a teaching pastor. And so Brian Laritz is really good. Tony Evans is another one out of Dallas. Yeah. Really, really good. I mean, Tony Evans is solid. So many books, so many devotionals, so many whatever. Tony Evans is just as solid as they come. And I think probably another one I would throw in there is Derwin Gray. Derwin Gray is a pastor in South Carolina. Derwin Gray he was a football player, played for the Colts for a while, and went to BYU. And he really big into multicultural ministry. And he has an incredible story. Was preaching, and then God called him to open up a church. And he talks about he did his first church plant, his first Sunday. He opened up his doors, and he had a service of 1,200 people, and he didn't realize that wasn't normal until much later. But like his first Sunday, like opening a church, was 1,200 people. And so incredible church, Transformation Church, not to be confused with Michael Todd's Transformation Church in Oklahoma. Derwin Gray's is in South Carolina. And so he's got a lot of great books, great ministry. Derwin Gray, Brian Laritz, Derwin Gray, Tony Evans.
So speaking of Tony Evans, I think I sent you, and this may be boring to other people, but I think I sent you the book that I got of his, the illustrations book.
Oh,
did you get that?
Did you get it? Brother, when you sent that to me, I bought it. Yes, I use it. And then our worship pastor, who's also, our worship pastor, whose office is right next to mine, he's in seminary right now going to New Orleans. And one day he borrowed it. And he borrowed my the commentary. And before he brought it back, he ended up buying both of the Tony Evans commentary and illustration book before the day was over with. Tony Evans is a beast, man. He's so good.
Yeah, we're not sponsored, but if he wants to, great.
No,
we're not sponsored.
Tony, sponsor us, brother.
But that illustrations book, because I when I teach a lot of stories and illustrations, and so that book, even if I don't use his exact illustration, it gets my mind going and just think about this is where I could take that. And it's so good. I've used it now, probably my last 10 sermons, I've used at least something from that book. And so
Tony is the man,
you preach,
for sure.
Tony Evans, I'm looking at it right now. It is the Tony Evans book of illustrations. So good.
I'm looking at it right now. Yes, we would not steer you wrong. We would not. I promise you. Tony Evans is the way to go when it comes to like illustration books, for sure.
Well, that's a great transition into my next question. I'll do one or two more. So this one is, how much time do you spend on your sermons? Like, what resources do you use as you prepare as a normal sermon? And then how much time do you spend on a sermon prep?
So
like I try night, not necessarily a Sunday.
Yeah, a Wednesday night. I try to knock that out Monday or Tuesday. A lot of times, if the week is busy, like this week, I was out Monday, and so they kind of pushed me back. But typically, I try to spend about 5 or 6 hours, I feel like.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, I'm trying to just think through my process. I try to break that up. I try not to just do that all at one time because I feel like I get very glossed over. And so I try to knock out an hour or two and then come back and then do it again and then like add stuff to it. And then probably the last hour and a half is like going over it again and then making changes. I don't know about you, but like I feel like if I do a sermon, even if like a Sunday sermon, if I'm doing it all week long, if I go over it Saturday night, like the last run through, I'll change a decent chunk of it because like my brain has thought about new stuff, how I want to close this, and I'll go back and read it, and I'm like, oh, this makes more sense. So I always try to leave a little bit of wiggle room at the end to kind of go back after I've left it alone for a while and kind of got away from it and come back to it. And so I use that. I mean, I use my Bible, the Tony Evans Study Bible.
Yep. Me too.
On the commentary. And then I don't know. Some people don't do this, but I like to do this. I like to listen to like 2 or 3 other sermons on the topic that I'm talking about, the passages, because like I just like YouTube like video commentary, and I think a lot of times people like stick their nose up. I know a few purists. I went to school with a few of these purists at Louisiana Christian University now, and they feel like, oh, you know, you got to do this whole thing from scratch and no outside help or whatever. And I've always been taught is like, you know, there's nothing new under the sun. Like you ain't about to come up with some brand new way to interpret the text anyway. Like it's okay to like get different commentaries and different people's opinions and all that stuff too. So I think it helps me understand where everybody else is coming from. So that's how I do it.
Yeah, and I'll watch people's sermons too, and really what I'm doing is, especially at the very beginning, when I'm not, I haven't worked out details yet. I just want to know what direction did they approach this. Is there a direction that maybe I didn't think about? That just kind of helps me get started in the sermon, and then once I'm getting to the nitty gritty, what illustrations am I using? What details am I focusing on? I try to stay away from listening to other people. That's that's when I get into the commentaries and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I don't think there's anything wrong with seeing how another minister approached the text.
I know some people that do, bro. They're weird. They're weird out here in these streets, man. They're weird.
I got you. All right, we'll do 2 more. What's the best advice that you have been given in ministry and that you think every minister needs to know?
The best advice, don't do it alone.
Oh, yeah, that's so good.
Don't do it alone in every aspect. I'm talking in trying to figure it out while you're in the thick of it, as far as like, you know, I mean, ministry gets hard. You're trying to go through this thing by yourself. Like, find people that can pick you up when you're going through a hard time as a pastor. Find those other groups of people that can love on you and can encourage you. Because I think we've seen too often, especially now, a lot of pastors who have fallen morally. And I think a lot of that comes from exhaustion and moments of weakness and just never creating the persona of I'm not perfect. There's a lot of pastors try to be perfect and try to have this image of perfection. And I think it doesn't create a space for them to be broken. And they have to think that I have to make it like I've got it all together. And so I think the best advice I've ever been told, it's okay to not be okay. Find community. Don't try to do this thing alone and ask questions, man. Be curious.
Yes.
And kind of like what we do, the whole point of this podcast, like be curious and try to find out other people's perspectives. And don't ever feel like your way is always the best and only way. Like there's always somebody that's doing it better. And it's not competition. We're all in this together. So don't do this thing by yourself in every aspect of it. Don't do it by yourself.
Yeah, because if you just get content with doing ministry how you've always done ministry, then you'll always get the results that you've always gotten. You always need to be looking to improve, always looking to do better. I mean, even my events, one of my best events that I have is my 6th grade event that I've done it now for almost 8 years, and I've got it down to a T. And we hired an assistant last year, and she went with me for the first time to see that event. And she said, "Have you ever thought about doing it like this?" I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Why haven't I ever done that? And it was an event that I would have stood up and pounded my fist on the table and said, "This is the best event. There's nothing wrong with it." And because we improved it this last year, it just made a world of difference. And that's from listening to people and not thinking we know everything. And so, yeah, absolutely. I completely agree.
I think to add on to that, Blake, like having people, and I'm not just saying like other pastors that don't go to your church, but like even surrounding yourself with people inside your ministry, your volunteers or whatever, having people around you with different opinions and different perspectives I am not a detail person. You are. That's why we get along. But like I am not a detail person. I'm a dreamer through and through. Like I am, and it drives my wife crazy. But like I surround myself with people. Like I have a planning meeting this coming Sunday with my planning team that we kind of plan out the whole semester. And they're all three of them are like walk in with their planners. They live by a planner. They live and die by planners. Like that's their thing. I buy them a planner at the start of the year. That's like my payment of saying, hey, thank you for being on my planning team. And they love it. And I just spit out ideas and they just sit there and say, well, Brandon, think about this. Brandon, what about this? How's this going to work? They send me, when we do a big event, they will, before we leave that event, I've got a shared notes section of every single detailed thing that went wrong, what went right, what we can do next time. Like I surround myself with people that are like that because I'm not, and it's okay that I'm not, but don't take pride in that not being you, and don't bring people around you that's going to help in those weaknesses. So make sure you surround yourself with people inside of your ministry that can complement you and make you a better pastor too.
And the big thing is you acknowledge that that's not your gifting. And so acknowledge, hey, this is not where I'm great. And so I'm going to surround myself with people that are. And so that's just part of being humble and understanding how God's gifted each one of us. So yeah, that's great.
That's good.
Final thing I'll ask is, as a minister, how do you deal with the mindset of not feeling worthy or good enough to be in the ministry?
Yeah. So I've got a good dose of imposter syndrome since I started doing photography and videography that I haven't felt in a long time, I feel like, because I think early on I went through that early stage of imposter syndrome as a student pastor, being a pastor, especially for me because I didn't want to be a pastor. I wanted to be a football coach. My last semester in college, God called me into the ministry and I fought it like crazy. And so I finally got into the ministry and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I didn't go to seminary. I would never intern in a church. And so a lot of times I just felt like I was flying by the seat of my pants. And very early on, I tried to surround myself with other pastors. And even doing that, it made me feel a little bit more like, bro, you have no idea what you're doing. And so I fought a lot with that imposter syndrome of feeling like I didn't belong. And up until like recently, I would even still be like, all right, this is the week where people are going to figure out this guy has no idea what he's doing. And like, I'm going to, do a sermon and it's going to like fall flat and be like, get this imposter off the stage. You just like, don't know, you feel like you don't belong. You're not good enough. And I've heard people of pastors who've been doing this for a long time or in every aspect of every job, every profession, feeling like they didn't belong. And so I had to realize like being different doesn't mean that you don't belong. A lot of times being different is what the space needs, whatever that is. Absolutely. For us as ministry. And so I had to learn to quiet that voice in my own mind that it was telling me, because it wasn't God telling me that, that's the devil, the enemy trying to, discourage me from doing what I was doing. And so imposter syndrome is just that feeling of, hey, you're not good enough. You shouldn't be doing this. Somebody else out there is much better than you. And once I became okay with, somebody probably is better than me. There's actually probably a lot of people that's better than me. And that's okay. Like there can only be one number one, and that might be the best youth pastor out there in the world. There's still a lot of students and people that they'll never reach. And there's a space for me to do what I'm doing. And there's a group of people. No matter how great you are as a pastor, there's another town, another city just next over that still needs to be ministered to, that needs to be loved, and needs to be pastored and shepherded. And so you can be the best youth pastor ever in your town, or somebody else can be the best youth pastor in their town. Doesn't matter. They'll never reach the kids in your town because that's not where God's called them to. And so part of imposter syndrome is just realizing like you have a purpose and a plan, and God has a purpose and a plan for you. And don't listen to that voice in your mind telling you that you're not good enough, because you are good enough. And, there's a place for you to be great at where you are. And, it's okay to like allow that voice to say, like, hey, you can be better at that, then take that and use it as motivation to keep growing and listen to these podcasts and find other youth pastors and other pastors to talk to and to pour into you, to be like, hey, I want to keep getting better at this thing and not be complacent. So use that as motivation a little bit too.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things that really hinders a young minister, especially, or maybe I was talking from experience, is pride. Is that I'm not going to ask people for help. If I ask for people help, then people's not going to think I should be doing this, or I'm not good enough to do the ministry because I need help. And so don't fall into that. Always ask for help. Always be willing to grow. But then the opposite end of the spectrum, I think we all, me and you, may be in that season of life now where we've been in ministry, in the specific ministry, for a long period of time, and we feel like we know everything, or we know everything you can know. And a quote that Brian Loritz said before, and I think it was Chuck Swindoll who he was quoting, but it said, the scary thing about ministry is that you can learn how to do it. And so that was so good for me. That quote stuck with me for a long time, is because the longer you've been in ministry, the more questions they ask, the more brains that you pick, you're going to get to know ministry really well. And then when we get to that point where we've learned how to do ministry, that's when we don't rely on the Holy Spirit, and we don't rely on God to really speak through us. All right.
Well, that's good, man. Oh my gosh, you can learn how
Brian
to do
Loritz.
it.
It wasn't me. But so it's two ends of the spectrum. At the very beginning of our ministry, we need to humble ourselves to say, hey, we don't know a lot, and it's okay, and we need to ask help, and we need to grow. But then once we do feel like that pride swelling up, and hey, I do know a lot, well, we still need the Holy Spirit just as much as we did on day one. And so constantly knowing that God, we need Him to help us grow no matter where we are in our stage of ministry. And so
that's good, anyway, man.
That's my 2 cents.
I like it.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good 2 cents, man. We'll go to the bank with them 2 cents. I like it.
Well, this has been fun picking your brain,
man.
Mr. Brandon.
Yeah, man. I'm excited. I think this has been really cool. I think that me and you both get to start this off because this is kind of like, what we do on a normal basis. But, man, I'm excited. I'm excited for the listeners. I'm excited for us to bring in more people. And I'm excited to pick their brain, man, through you, So I'm excited about that too, man. A lot of excitement going around.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, man, y'all listen. Y'all be on the lookout for my homie, Mr. Dr. Blake, man, because he is about to shake up the ministry game with this one. And so this should probably be the longest podcast out of all of them, because I know Blake, he's probably going to have a stopwatch, and at 15 minutes, he's going to be cutting it off. So we'll let this one slide because it is the pilot episode. And so it'll be a little bit longer. But other than that, man, I'm excited for these quick sound bites, these quick bites I can grab on my way to grab something to eat or do something else. So, yeah, man. Blake, you about to kill it, man. I'm excited. Y'all make sure y'all turn those notifications on because y'all don't want to miss on these ministry episodes.
All right. Well, I look forward to it. Hopefully we get the next episode out in the next week or so.
Yes, sir. Y'all have a good one. We'll see y'all next time. We out.
All right.